You've seen the mask, that long curved beak, the wide-brimmed hat, the black robe that looks more like a costume than a cure. You've probably imagined it, with eerie violins playing behind it, some mysterious doctor strolling through fog-covered medieval alleys, here to save the sick. But here's the truth. That mask didn't work. The man beneath it probably didn't either. Plague doctors weren't trained physicians. Many of them couldn't even read. In fact, most were unemployed barbers, ex-soldiers, or desperate men looking for a coin hired by towns too poor or too panicked to do better. Their job wasn't to heal. It was to count the dead, to poke at swollen corpses with a wooden stick and say, "Yes, this one too." And that beak, it was stuffed with herbs to filter the air because people thought bad smells caused the plague. Not rats, not fleas, not bacteria. So no, that mysterious doctor in your nightmares isn't a hero. He's scared, sweating inside his mask. And if you were sick in 1348, he wouldn't save you. He'd just write your name on a growing list of the soon-to-be dead. Imagine this. You're called a plague doctor, even though no one ever taught you medicine. They handed you a black robe, a bird-beaked mask, stuffed with rosemary, and a long wooden stick to keep your distance. You don't know what you're doing, but you need the money. The city paid you 3 silver coins and a loaf of bread so hard it could break a tooth. In return, you're sent to your first house, the one with a plague mark on the door. You stand before it. A red symbol drawn in dried blood warns of sickness inside. You knock. No answer. The hinges creak as you push the door open. The air is thick, heavy. Sour rot sweats something like burnt herbs. You step inside. A woman lies, curled on the floor. Skin pale, lips cracked. A swollen lump beneath her arm oozes dark fluid. Her eyes meet yours. She says nothing, just stares. You tap her shoulder with your stick. She groans. Alive. You search your pockets. No medicine, no instructions. Just scraps of paper scribbled with nonsense like burn sage. Read psalms. Apply cold stones. You kneel not too close. You watch her twitch in fevered silence. A child peeks from behind the table. Wide eyes. No tears. No blink. You hear flies. Probably from the corner where a blanket covers something. Something no longer moving. You leave at dusk. You didn't help. You don't know what you touched. Only that tomorrow you'll do it again. Another family, another house, another stench. You're not a doctor. You're just a man in black walking through death, trying somehow to survive. So there it is. Not everyone in a hat is a healer. Not everyone behind a mask knows what they're doing. Now do something simple. Dim your lights, lower the volume, lean back into your pillow. Inhale slowly and exhale softer. And if you're still here, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. I always love seeing those quiet whispers from across the world. We'll keep going together, gently, because this story is just beginning. Before the plague came, 14th century Europe was already on the edge of disaster, a place without clean water, without antibiotics, and without a single understanding of what caused disease. But the most dangerous thing wasn't what people lacked. It was what they believed. You'd wake up in a wooden house, walls crumbling with dried mud, and mold roof patched with straw that leaked every time it rained. Light slips in through a cracked shutter, dusty and dim. No glass, no tiles. Just dirt underfoot, packed so tightly it became your floor shared with fleas, rats, and your own waste. There's no bathroom. Instead, a wooden pot in the corner, the chamber pot, waits to be dumped. If you're lucky, you carry it to the town ditch. If not, you toss it into the street. Water is considered dangerous. People believe bathing too often weakens the body, opening it to bad air. Most simply rub their hands with ashes or old wine. Hygiene, as you know it, doesn't exist. You eat with your fingers. You scratch lice from your scalp. You wear the same stiff tunic for weeks, and the smell, thick human constant, goes unnoticed. Because everyone stinks the same. You believe your body runs on 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. If you're sick, it means they're out of balance. No one talks of infection. No one knows bacteria. If you have a fever, the doctor will drain your blood. If you cough, they might burn herbs over your chest. Doctors learn from ancient Greek texts, filtered through Latin, passed through centuries. They trust astrology. They chart the stars and link your stomachache to the position of Jupiter. Every illness has a cosmic explanation. The church controls knowledge. Books are copied by hand in Latin. Only clergy can read. The average person is illiterate. Truth travels by rumor. If someone survives a sickness, maybe they made a deal with the devil. If a child recovers when others die, maybe they're cursed, or blessed, or both. You live in a world where death is a routine. A cut can kill you. A birth can kill your wife. Life expectancy. Maybe 40 if you're lucky. And the only promise of hope comes from the church, which tells you suffering is divine. Medicine is belief, not science. Pain is purification. And all sickness is either your fault or God's will. This world didn't need the plague to be horrifying. It was already a slow-motion tragedy. But then, the Black Death arrived, and everything got worse, faster, darker. Fear stopped being a feeling. It became the very air you breathed. No one knew exactly where the plague began, but every path pointed east to the trade routes, the ships, the soldiers, and the rats that rode with them. In 1346, at the port city of Kaffa, on the Crimean Peninsula, a siege was underway. Mongol forces had surrounded the Genoese traders who held the city. Then something happened that had never been recorded before. The Mongols, many of whom were dying of a strange disease, began catapulting the corpses of their dead over the city walls. It was in crude form biological warfare, and it worked. The Genoese fled in terror, boarding ships and escaping westward across the Black Sea. They thought they had survived, but they carried death with them in the form of small black rats and the fleas that clung to their backs. Those ships arrived in Messina, Sicily in 1347. Within days, people fell ill. Fevers, coughing, strange swellings beneath the arms and around the neck. The port tried to shut down, but it was too late. Other ships had already reached Genoa, and Marseille, and Barcelona. At every harbor, the disease leapt ashore. It spread like wildfire, first along the Mediterranean coast, then inland by road and river. From Italy to France to Germany, Switzerland, across the Alps, into Austria and Hungary. No one understood what was happening. Some blamed the foul stench of the air. Others pointed to a recent comet in the sky, surely a cosmic warning. In some places, people bathed in rosewater, hoping the sweet smell would protect them from corruption. But the real enemy, Yersinia pestis, a bacterium, said nothing. It lived inside the gut of fleas. The fleas fed on rats. When the rats died, the fleas jumped to humans. The disease wasn't airborne, but no one knew that. They only saw that people were collapsing fast. You might be eating lunch when someone across the table slumped forward. By sunset, they'd be feverish. By nightfall, delirious. By morning, their body wrapped in a blanket and dragged to a pit. Sometimes, it wasn't just one person. It was the whole household. The speed of the spread was so terrifying, people thought it had to be supernatural. A punishment from God, a curse from witches, or worse, a plague born from the devil's breath. There were no vaccines, no antibiotics, no public health. No one counted cases. No one buried the dead fast enough. There were only rats, there were only knocks on doors, and the heavy silence that followed, when no one inside was left to answer. At first, no one called it the plague. There was no name, only whispers of a strange illness, a curse, a punishment. People believed God was angry, angry at sin, at witches, at war. Churches filled with kneeling crowds begging for mercy. Processions marched through towns, holding crosses, chanting prayers. Some people wore charms. Others flogged themselves with leather whips, trying to purge their souls through pain. But the deaths kept coming, faster than anyone could understand. And those who once believed in divine justice began to question. If this was God's will, why were priests dying too? If only the wicked were punished, why were newborns dying in their cribs? Helplessness spread faster than the disease. And when people lose control, they start looking for someone to blame. In Strasbourg, hundreds of Jews were burned alive, accused of poisoning wells. In other towns, beggars, widows, herbalists, even people with physical deformities were dragged into the streets, beaten, hanged. Fear turned to rage. Anyone who looked different was suspicious. Anyone who didn't get sick, even more so. In panic, many fled the cities. But wherever they went, the plague followed. Country roads, inns, taverns, all became new points of contagion. Some cities tried to shut their gates, building barricades banning outsiders. But there were no real quarantines, no inspections, and when the lockdowns came too late, the infected were already inside. Some doctors tried to help. They burned herbs, recommended onion poultices, prescribed amber to smell goat urine to drink, but most simply observed, took notes, left quietly. The wealthy paid for corpses to be buried far from their homes. The poor dug holes in their own yards. And then there were the dancers. A strange phenomenon swept across Europe, people dancing wildly in the streets, day and night, until they collapsed from exhaustion. Their clothes soaked, feet bleeding. They said they heard music, said dancing kept the plague away. No one understood anymore. All the old truths, religion, medicine, morality had failed. What remained was silence, and death, and despair. And no matter how many prayers were whispered, how many herbs were burned, how many innocent people were punished, the plague did not stop. It was only just beginning. Imagine it's early morning, but there are no birds singing outside, no warm sunlight spilling across your floor. You don't wake up to peace. You wake up to the sound of shallow, rattling breath beside you. You don't open your eyes right away. You're afraid, because somewhere deep down, you already know. The straw mattress creaks as you shift, and there she is, your sister, still. Her chest barely rises and falls. Her skin is pale, her lips cracked and dry, but it's the lump beneath her jaw that freezes your blood, swollen, dark purple, almost black. You've never seen anything like it. You whisper her name. Her body is still warm, but her eyes won't open. Her breath smells rotten, like spoiled meat left in the sun. You sit up suddenly. The room is stifling. A narrow window casts a dull strip of light across the dirt floor. Flies buzz lazily in the corner, where yesterday's chamber pot still sits. The smell of sweat, mildew, and something worse sweet, and sickly clings to everything. You look around. Your father is in the fields, your mother left for the market at dawn. It's just you and her. And something inside her you don't understand. You reach out, press a hand to her forehead. It's burning. You recoil. Your stomach twists. Your heart thuds too loud in your chest. You remember the whispers around the village. The first sign is the lump. Then comes fever, confusion, and the smell of death. Then they die. Fast, you edge back toward the wall. Your hands tremble. You don't know whether to touch her again or run. You want to scream for help. But if someone finds out your sister is sick, they might seal your door. Mark your house. No one in. No one out. Your family left to rot. You glance at her one more time. She groans softly, not awake, not asleep, just slipping out of the world. You whisper, "Don't die." But even that feels useless. Because deep inside, you already know she won't make it. And maybe neither will you. The house you live in doesn't really feel like a house. It's more like a damp wooden box. The walls are packed with clay, now cracked and flaking. The thatched roof has holes. Every time it rains, the drops fall straight into the cooking fire. The smell of smoke and mildew clings to everything. Your clothes, your hair, the shared blanket you sleep under with your sister. There's no such thing as a bedroom. Just one cramped space where everyone eats, sleeps, and breathes. One corner holds the kitchen, a blackened stone hearth always streaked with soot. The other side where the chickens sleep, sometimes the piglets too, right beside you. You sleep on a straw mattress. Not really a mattress, more like a burlap sack stuffed with old hay, untouched for seasons, thick with dust and probably fleas. Every time you turn, it creaks. Dust rises in little clouds. It feels less like a bed, more like lying on the ground and pretending not to notice. The blanket is always damp. There isn't enough sunlight to dry it. Fog rolls in every evening. Winters last too long, and your house, like hundreds of others, was never built to keep warmth in. Just to keep the wind out, sometimes. You wrap yourself in that clammy blanket each night, trying to fall asleep to the sound of your sister's labored breathing beside you. You don't touch her anymore. She's still alive, but it's a fragile sort of living, like mist clinging to leaves before the sun comes up. You can smell her now. Not her sweat, not her breath. Something deeper, something wrong. A hint of decay, just enough to notice. and enough to haunt you. You don't know if it's coming from the lump beneath her jaw, or if her body is beginning to rot while she's still breathing. And then a darker thought. If she dies, how long will you be lying beside her? One day, too, who will come to carry her out? Would anyone dare? And if no one does, what will you do? You sit there in the middle of the room, no voices, no clatter of dishes, no chickens scratching the dirt. Only her faint breaths, the low buzz of flies, and your own heartbeat, not because you're alive, but because you're afraid. The house that once felt like shelter now feels like a trap, a waiting room for death. And you don't know who's next. You don't know what your sister has, but you know what the grown-ups call it. Some say the Black Death. Others call it the devil's breath, or simply God's punishment. No one knows the cause, but everyone has a cure. One neighbor tells your mother to hang raw onions in the window to ward off the poisoned air. An old woman hands you a pouch of dried herbs, mugwort, sage, lavender. Burn this, she says. The smoke keeps the sickness away. It smells strong, sweet, sharp. The smoke curls around the room like incense. They say it drives out evil, drives out death. A priest once came to your village. He walked from house to house, reading verses aloud. God is testing us, he said. Pray, confess, suffer well. It cleans the soul. Others believed the opposite. They stopped praying, stopped trusting. They joined the flagellants marching from town to town, whipping their own backs with leather cords, singing hymns of repentance, bleeding in the streets, believing pain would make God forgive. Some boiled urine and inhaled the steam. Others rubbed onions on their buboes. Some spread bear fat on their skin, or drank powdered emeralds. The more desperate tried everything, wore amulets tied, dried frogs to their necks, hung rat skulls above their doors. You watch your mother light a candle. She whispers a prayer, then dips a cloth into rose water and wipes your sister's forehead. Your father stands beside her silently, tucking a sprig of rosemary under the pillow. No one says it aloud, but you know they're desperate. No one talks about rats. No one says the word flee. They believe the air has gone bad, that a comet disturbed the heavens, or maybe someone in the village, the strange widow who lives alone, has cast a spell. And while they burn herbs and chant prayers, while they beat their own backs and beg for mercy, your sister grows weaker. The lump swells. Her eyes fade like mist at dawn. Each breath she takes feels borrowed. And you just sit there, watching candles melt, breathing in smoke and silence, and hoping somehow that one of these things will work. But deep inside, you know they're not curing her. They're just trying to hold on to something to believe in. When you step outside, if you dare, the first thing you notice isn't the sunlight or the breeze. It's the smell. A stench you can't name. Thick, sweet, rotting. The smell of waste, of sweat, of death. The smell of fear, of neglect, of the plague. The road is slick with mud and garbage. There are no sewers. Human waste scraps of spoiled food, dead rats all dumped straight into the street. You step carefully, not because you mind the filth, but because you don't want to imagine what's decaying beneath your feet. From a distance, you hear the church bell. Not the usual peal, just slow, lonely tolls. One toll for one death. Sometimes, one for an entire household. You pass a house marked with a red cross on the door. You know what that means. Sickness inside, or worse. The shutters are sealed. There are no cries, no whispers. Just a strip of black cloth tied around the handle. The silent message. Don't knock, don't ask. At the end of the lane, you see a cart piled high with bodies, roughly covered in burlap. Fly swarm. A leg sticks out, a hand limp and gray. No one bothers to cover them anymore. The cart puller keeps his eyes down. He doesn't look at you. He knows where he's going, to the mass graves just beyond the town walls. Some bodies are left on doorsteps. Maybe the family all died and there was no one left to move them. Or maybe they died alone in the street and no one dared go near. Somewhere a child cries, not from hunger, from fear. A harsh cough echoes down an alley. You freeze. You don't know who it is, but that cough. It sounds like your sister's. It sounds like death. You try not to look anyone in the eye. If they see you're healthy, they might envy you. If they see you're sick, they'll already see a corpse. Your town used to be noisy. Vendors shouting, Wagons rattling, arguments in the marketplace. Now there's only the buzzing of flies, the creak of cartwheels, and silence, thick and solid like a wall pressing in on your ears. A silence that feels like it has shape, like it breathes, like it's watching. And one day soon, it might swallow you whole. Your sister died around midnight. No scream, no struggle, just one final breath. Then silence. You lay there, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling, too afraid to turn your head, because you knew the cold beside you no longer belonged to someone living. The next morning, you said nothing. You didn't cry, you didn't scream. You just sat, staring at nothing, still clutching the damp, cold blanket. Your parents came home. They saw and understood, but they didn't say much either. There was no funeral, no candles, no neighbors offering condolences. Just an old sack, a wooden cart, and two pairs of eyes avoiding the words they couldn't say. By evening she was taken away. No church bell, no procession. You stood in the doorway, holding the beam, too scared to step closer. Her body was wrapped in rough cloth, head slumped to the side, hair covering half her face. You didn't look too closely. You didn't want that to be the last image you kept. After that, there was emptiness. The house had one more empty bed, and a silence that stretched so long it felt like all sound had died with her. You tried to eat, but nothing tasted like food. You tried to sleep, but every night you woke up halfway, instinctively turning toward the empty side, and forgetting for a moment that she wasn't there. The neighbors said nothing. No one came by. They were afraid. Afraid your family had it. Afraid something invisible still clung to your walls, or your breath. That's when you understood. Here anyone could be left behind. A father too weak to lift a cup of water to his lips, slowly fading in bed. A mother bleeding after childbirth, left lying cold on the floor. An old man, dead in the corner of the room for days, unseen, unnoticed. A child too young to care for herself, starving, freezing because no one had the strength to hold her. Death no longer came with wails. It came quietly, soft as wind slipping through a cracked wall, heavy as a door that closes and never opens again. You started avoiding people's eyes, not because you were hiding sickness, but because you recognized that look, the look of someone who had lost someone, the look of someone who knew they might be next. And inside you, something began to go numb, not from fear, but from getting used to loss. Not everyone dies. Even though you see bodies every day, hear the church bells each evening, smell the rot and decay on every corner, some people survive. And you start to notice them. They're not the strongest, not the richest, not the ones who pray the hardest or drink the most medicine. They're strange, different. There's an old woman at the edge of the village. She lives alone, no children. People used to avoid her. She grows her own herbs, boils her own water, burns straw to keep bugs away. She never got sick. People whispered she was a witch. Now, they quietly ask her how to brew her leaves. There's a man who lives deep in the woods, eats mushrooms, drinks rainwater. He hasn't set foot in town since the first death. People once called him mad. Now, he's the only one who hasn't buried a loved one. There's a family so poor they live in a mud shack beyond the fields. They were too poor to host visitors, too forgotten to catch the plague. And they're still alive. You begin to see the pattern, those who avoid crowds, those who don't trust holy cures, those who don't gather in chapels or busy markets. They're the ones who make it. Some survive out of luck. Like that boy you used to play with. His whole family died. He didn't. No fever, no cough, just breathing. Still here. People say God spared him. Others say his blood is different. You don't know. You just know he's alive. And that feels like a miracle. You start to wonder, are you one of them? Do you have something inside you that's stronger than death, or have you just not been chosen yet? You speak less, eat less. You avoid people, even your mother when she coughs. You wash your hands with ash. You don't touch door handles. You keep rosemary under your pillow. You don't know what works, so you do everything. Because survival isn't hope anymore. It's instinct, a quiet fleeing from something no one understands. And every night you whisper to the dark, not today. Please, not today. You used to hold your sister's hand at the market. Used to cuddle your mother at night. Used to play tug-of-war past stones, blindfold tag, shoulder to shoulder, hand in hand, without a second thought. But now, Touching anyone sends a chill through your spine. You see it in other people's eyes. When you cough, even slightly, they take a step back. When you walk toward them, they turn away. And you do the same, not out of hatred, but out of fear, because now death could be resting on someone's skin, on their sleeve, on the handle of a door, in a hug you didn't mean to give. You remember the last time you held your sister's hand. It burned like fire. Her fingers twitched. You squeezed gently, but she didn't squeeze back, just gasped, then silence. Since then, you haven't touched another soul. Your mother wears gloves when she cooks now. Your father opens doors with a rag. You all eat apart, spaced out, barely speaking, avoiding each other's gaze. No one dares touch the bodies. The men who collect the dead use thick cloth, long sticks, pushing, dragging, tossing them onto carts as if they're clearing garbage. Not people. Children don't play anymore. No hand-holding, no kites, no skipping rope. Just distant stares, unsure eyes that seem to have forgotten what friendship feels like. You remember what skin felt like, warm, soft, alive. Now, everyone looks half dead already, because no one touches anyone anymore. You used to think fear of death was the worst thing, but then you learned there's something worse. It's being alive and no one daring to touch you, no one to hold you when you shake, no one to guide your hand when you're lost. Dying of disease might be fast, but dying of loneliness is slow, daily. You can't remember the last time someone hugged you, can't remember the warmth of a palm, can't remember the feeling of being held tight. And on those long, freezing nights, you don't just shiver because of the wind. You shiver because your heart is forgetting that humans were meant to touch each other, not to flinch, not to hide, not to disappear alone into the dark. You'd heard stories about them. Men in long black robes, wearing masks shaped like bird beaks, walking slowly through the silent alleyways, tapping the ground with their sticks. Plague doctors. When you were younger, you thought they were healers, symbols of hope, people who came to save the sick. But now, seeing one in person feels completely different. Their masks have no eyes, just two round glass lenses, cold and lifeless. The beak is long curved, stuffed with dried herbs, mint lavender vinegar, sometimes even opium. They believe the scent protects them from the poisoned air. To you, it just makes the air feel heavier, harder to breathe. Their robes are coated in wax or oilcloth, sealed tightly from head to toe. They wear gloves, a wide-brimmed hat, heavy boots. They never touch the sick, only point with a stick. A tap to check for a pulse, another to confirm death. When they arrive at your home, you hold your breath. No one invited them. They just appear, drawn by whispers, by red marks on doors, by the sound of crying through the night. They don't speak much, just nod, write something down, then leave. No medicine, no comfort. People used to think they were doctors, but after a while you begin to realize they're just counters, counting the living, counting the dead, counting which homes to board up next, which bodies to collect. They don't pray, they don't perform blessings, they just write in their ledgers and move on. You once dreamed of being seen by a doctor, of being healed. Now, you just hope they never knock on your door. Some say they're messengers of death. Others say they're crows gliding silently over the rooftops of the dying. And when you watch their shadow disappear behind the houses, you don't feel relief. You don't feel safer. You feel a reminder death is near, and no one can stop it. They said if someone dies of the plague, keep nothing. No clothes, no bedding, no keepsakes. Everything is unclean. Everything is cursed. Everything could kill the next person who touches it. So when your sister died, your mother took her things outside. No one spoke. No one cried. She just lit the fire. You watched your sister's favorite dress go up in flames, her hand-sewn kerchief, her wooden comb, her worn-out shoes one by one swallowed by smoke, the scent of burning cloth mixed with candle wax, herbs, and memories. You wanted to keep something, just one thing, but your mother's eyes were clear. No, nothing stays. There is no room for memory, only survival. Then the village started going further. They burned houses. If two people died under one roof, the house was tainted. Cursed. They brought straw, poured oil, set it all ablaze. One day you passed an empty lot where your friend's home used to stand. Now only ashes, blackened stones, a half-standing wall. No one speaks their names anymore. Some people locked themselves inside, afraid that if neighbors suspected illness, they'd be burned alive too. Death was no longer the only fear. Now it was surviving, with nothing. You once saw a child crying, clutching a stuffed toy, while men from the village set fire to his home. He didn't understand. He only saw everything he loved disappear into the flames. And no one said sorry. You started hiding things, a letter, a scarf, a button, because everything could vanish, be burned, be called dangerous, even if it was love. You learned something harsh during the plague. Nothing is sacred, only fear and fire, and the silence of those too afraid to speak, in case they're next. You used to go to church every week. The bells would ring across the village, doors wide open, candlelight flickering, the priest's deep voice echoed through incense and hymns. You believed the church was the safest place, where God lived, where death could not enter. But now, the doors are shut tight. No more bells, no more mass. No one lines up for communion, no babies baptized. The priest once stood in the square holding a cross high, urging the village to pray. Now, he's gone. Some say he died, some say he fled. No one dares to ask too much. You walk past the church so silent, you hear the wind whistling through the cracks. The statues are draped in black cloth, candles unlit. The smell of old incense still clings to the air, but it's fading like a memory losing shape. You once knelt there, begging God to save your sister. Now, you're not sure anyone is listening. Villagers hold their own prayers at home. They hang crosses above doors, whisper psalms beneath blankets. Some draw strange symbols in chicken blood on their walls. Others turn to the sun, the moon, to herbs, anything that might offer hope. You realize faith is no longer peace. It's a torn cloth everyone clutches, soaked, frayed, falling apart in their hands. The sermons are gone, replaced by broken prayers, soft cries, and whispers no longer sure who they're calling to. You used to think, if I'm good, God will protect me. Now you think, if I stay quiet, if I don't touch anyone, if no one sees me, maybe I'll live. The church is just a shadow now. Not sacred, not warm, just a cold stone room where God once stayed. But now he's gone, like everyone else. When death made no sense, people began to try everything. They burned herbs around the sick, rosemary, lavender incense. Vinegar soaked with flowers. They wore scented pouches around their necks, stuffed herbs into their masks and nostrils. They hung halved oranges in windows, believing the citrus scent would chase away evil air. Some drank vinegar, others inhaled the smoke of burned hair from the dead. One woman burned dog fur and mixed the ash with honey to smear on the swellings. They bled themselves, cut their skin, applied raw onions, placed leeches along their limbs. They believed if bad blood left the body, healing could begin. Some starved themselves for days to lighten the soul. Others beat their backs nightly, hoping to earn forgiveness. You once saw a man walk through the town square, whipping his back, as he cried, "Forgive me, forgive me." Healers popped up like weeds. One sold powder made of clay mixed with holy water. Another sold charms, medicinal wine leaf poultices, all at cruel prices. You remember watching your mother trade her wedding ring for a small bottle of thick violet liquid. They said it would kill the sickness inside. Your sister drank it. The next day, she couldn't speak. No one really knew what worked, but everyone tried. Because trying felt better than waiting. Because even a hopeless hope felt safer than silence. You tried too. Onion on your feet, clay on your forehead, herbal steam beneath your blanket. You knew it made no sense. But when the person beside you dies, what else is there to lose? And then you realize the real cure everyone is searching for is not herbs or vinegar or bloodletting. It's the feeling that they're doing something, that they aren't helpless, that they still have control, even a little, even if it means nothing. Because in a time of panic, action becomes prayer. And a bottle of false medicine can still be someone's last hope. When reason could no longer explain what was killing everyone, belief began to drift far from reality. Whispers spread, "There's a curse. God is punishing us." Someone opened an ancient seal. The dead are coming back to drag the living down. You once heard the old woman next door say, "If you look into the eyes of someone dying, you'll be the next." You started keeping your eyes down every time you entered a sick room. People turned mirrors to face the wall, afraid the soul would get trapped inside. They smashed the bowls used by the dead, scattered salt around the bed, and hid scissors under pillows to cut the dark energy. One family dragged a black cat into the village square and burned it, believing it was the devil in disguise. Another mixed hair and blood into dough, baked it, and threw it onto the roof, begging the heavens for mercy. You saw neighbors digging holes in their yards, burying clothing from the sick with whispered prayers. They believed if it was buried deep enough, death wouldn't crawl back out. Some lit 100 candles each night, arranged in a circle, sitting in the center chanting ancient words they didn't understand. Only that. Someone who survived once did the same. Women tied garlic around their children's necks, drew ash symbols on their foreheads, and whispered, "The darkness won't recognize them as human." You began to wonder which is superstition and which is hope. You used to laugh when someone bowed to a tree in the market square. Now, you bowed too, just once, quietly as you passed, because in an age of dying, no one wants to miss a chance at survival, even if that chance is thin, illogical, or absurd. You realize people don't just fear death. They fear the lack of explanation. And in the middle of panic nonsense, sometimes becomes the only thing that still makes them feel in control. You grew up with barking. At night, they guarded the doors. By day, they chased chickens rolled in dust played in the sun. Dogs were part of life, loyal, noisy, familiar. Now, they're gone. No more barking in the morning. No tails wagging at the gate when you come home. No warm bodies stretched out on the porch. Just silence. You hear whispers dogs carry the plague. They bring evil spirits. Dog meat wards off death. Some were killed. Some were chased away. Some simply vanished, as if they too could sense danger in the air. You remember the day they took your dog. He never bit anyone. He simply lay by your sister's bed from the moment her fever began to the moment her breath stopped. They said he'd been too close to death, that he was bad luck. You begged. Your mother cried. They didn't listen. He was dragged away without even a final bark. After that, the village felt different, too quiet. At night, no barking. When a stranger walked by, no alarm. When rats scurried into grain stores, no chase. You began to realize dogs didn't just guard homes. They guarded routine. They held warmth between cold moments. They were the living heartbeat of the streets. You lie awake in the dark, ears straining for a scratch at the doorpaws, on dirt, a soft panting breath. Nothing. And then it hits you when the dogs leave people behind. Maybe hope leaves with them. They had no names. No one called them doctors, priests, or healers. Just the gravediggers. Every day they moved from house to house, pulling a rickety wooden cart behind them. You could hear the wheels grinding on gravel from far away, the soft creak of doors opening, a whisper, another one. Then the groan of weight being lifted, a body cold and light as air. No one asked the name of the dead. No one held a ceremony. They simply took and disappeared. They wore black robes, faces covered, not for ritual, but to avoid looking into the eyes of the living, to keep those faces out of their sleep. You once watched them work, digging shallow pits at the village's edge, hurriedly without gravestones, bodies piled like sacks, dirt shoveled on. Then they moved on. No tears, no farewells, just a job. Some say they were paid. Others said they were prisoners forced into it. There were even those who believed they had died long ago, and only their bodies remained fulfilling one final task. You once looked into the eyes of one of them. There was nothing there. No fear, no sadness, just emptiness. One day, they knocked on your door. Not to take someone, but to ask, "Anyone coughing in here?" You shook your head. They stared for a moment, then nodded and left. You stood frozen for hours after, because for the first time you realized when they knock, they're not just checking. They're asking if it's your turn yet. No one remembers where the grave diggers lived, what they ate, where they slept, only that they came when someone died, and left when the pit was full. And you wonder when death finally ends, who will dig the graves for them? You used to know the smell of breakfast. Slightly burned bread, your mother's soup warming on the stove, wet grass in the morning firewood, smoke curling from the chimney. Now, you know only one smell: death. It's unlike anything else. Not just rot, not just filth. It's sweet in the most horrifying way, like spoiled fruit, mixed with rotting meat rising from the ground, from walls, from breath itself. You smell it in the alley, on your sleeves, in your sleep. Even after burning herbs, lighting incense, hanging dried orange peels, it seeps into every corner. One day you walk past a charred patch where a house once stood. Nothing's left but ash and dirt. Yet the smell lingers, clinging to your hair, crawling down your throat. People wear sachets around their necks, stuff mint in their noses, splash vinegar on the floors, but nothing covers it up. You once saw a man vomit the moment he opened the door to a house with a 3-day-old corpse. Another fainted at the market when the wind blew from the direction of the graveyard. You learn to breathe through your mouth, to avoid eating before leaving home, to hold it in because no one has the strength to clean anything up anymore. The smell haunts you so deeply you can't tell anymore if you're sick. Every odd scent makes you panic. Is it a dead body? Or is it you? One night you woke in a panic, sure that your blanket smelled of corpses. You bathed, scrubbed until your skin burned your clothes. But the smell stayed in your thoughts. You realize the plague doesn't only kill with disease, it kills with memory, with scents no one taught you how to name, but that you will never forget. They don't say much. They don't leave the house. They don't meet your eyes. They just exist. You know them. They used to have husbands, wives, children. Now, they have only themselves. Some sit by the window all day, unmoving, eyes wide, like they're watching someone who's long gone. You're not sure if they still hear anything, or if they've simply stopped wanting to. Some go to the market before sunrise, buying just one onion, one loaf of bread, because when you eat alone, that's enough. Some fold blankets every morning, as if someone still sleeps beside them. They set 2 bowls at the table, leave the door slightly open, but no one comes in. You once heard singing from an abandoned house, a hoarse, broken lullaby. No one inside, but the voice. You stood still, didn't knock. Some grief cannot be shared. People call them survivors, but you're not sure that word fits. Surviving, what does it mean to breathe, to not die, to move through days with a heart already shattered? There's an old woman who never took off her mourning scarf, an old man who refuses to move the empty chair at his dinner table, a young woman who no longer laughs, no longer looks in mirrors because there's no one left to tell her she's beautiful. You used to think surviving was victory. Now, you're not so sure, because some people live, but their eyes are hollow, their steps so light they leave no trace, their voices little more than breath, and their hearts beat only out of habit. You look at them, and you understand some wounds don't bleed, but they never heal. You used to hold your mother's hand crossing the road, held your sister's hand at the market, held your best friend's hand when both of you cried over something silly. Hands they speak without words. They say, I'm here, I'm not leaving, you're not alone. Now, no one dares touch anyone. When someone coughs, you step back. When someone falls, you just watch. When someone weeps, you stand at a distance watching their shoulders tremble. You once saw a mother kneeling beside her dying daughter, just half a meter away, but she couldn't go closer. Her hands kept reaching out, then pulling back, as if the girl wasn't hers anymore. You saw an elderly couple sitting on either side of a bed, faces turned away from each other. No holding, no hugging, just waiting. You wanted to hug someone, but the thought of death pulled your hands back. Touch became danger. A hug became a sentence. A held hand could be the last goodbye. You wonder, how long can a person live without being touched? Some didn't die from the plague, but from the silence of not being held when they needed it most. Tiny fingers once reached out in desperation and touched only cold air. Trembling hands searched for an anchor and found only stone. You look at your own hands, pale, cold, so unused you forget where to put them. You want to hold someone, but who would dare let you? You understand now. The plague kills in many ways. Sometimes it only needs to take away the smallest thing, a hand to hold, a moment of comfort, the silent presence of another human being. No one really knows why they're still alive. Same house, same street, same market, same well, same rats. But when the entire family was gone, one person remained sitting, breathing, watching in silence. You once saw the old woman from the corner, the one who used to laugh loud every morning and sell warm bread. Now there's no one left to buy, no one to talk to. Yet every morning she opens the door, places the basket of bread on the wooden stool, and waits though no one comes. You met a boy who survived after losing his whole family. He didn't speak, just drew in the dirt with a stick, day after day. When the rain came, he sat still watching his pictures dissolve. And the next day, he'd start over. Some survived because they hid. So well no one remembered they were there. Some lived because they didn't dare to die, because they were afraid, because maybe someone might still need them. You once asked, "Why are you still here?" An old man just shrugged and said, "Because I'm not dead." The answer was so simple it made your throat tighten. Living isn't always about hope. Sometimes it's just habit, because the body hasn't stopped yet, because the morning still asks you to boil water, sweep the floor, cook a small meal. Some live because of a promise, because a cat still waits, because a letter was never finished, because a tree hasn't bloomed yet, and you begin to understand. Survival isn't always heroic. It's small, quiet, stubborn. It lives in a shallow breath, in a cup of warm tea, in a glance, even if no one looks back. And even when the plague takes everything, some people remain, not because they were the strongest, but because they simply were still there. You thought that once it was all over, things would go back to how they were. The dead would be buried with care. Homes would be cleaned. Bread would smell warm again each morning. The church bell would ring, and you would go on living. But it didn't happen like that. Everything looked like before, but nothing truly was. The windows still opened to the sun, but the light no longer felt warm. You still walked to the market, but now everyone kept their distance. No one touched, no one spoke of those who were gone. You once tried to tell the story, the smell of bodies, the sleepless nights, your sister's eyes the moment she realized she wouldn't make it. People only listened in silence, not because they didn't believe you, but because they couldn't bear to. So you learned to stay quiet, carrying the memories in your chest like a cold stone, heavy but familiar. Some nights you dream of them, the ones who didn't survive. They don't speak. They just stand there looking at you, as if to ask, "Why are you still here?" and you don't know what to say. You tried writing it down. In an old notebook, your handwriting tilted, smudged. But every name you wrote pulled something inside you back to a wound that never really closed. Someone once told you, "Just forget." But you couldn't. To forget felt like dying a second time. So you began lighting a candle each night, not to pray for anything in particular, just to let the soft glow remind you that you're still breathing, and that each of them was once real. You've come to understand survival doesn't just mean escaping death. It means carrying everything death left behind. And memory, even when it hurts, is the only thing that keeps you close to the ones you loved. Even if only in silence, even if only in dreams. You were once taught how to weave baskets, how to keep a fire burning with the least amount of wood, how to choose fresh greens, wrap cakes, warm clothes over ash-heated bricks. You once sat beside your grandmother, listening to old folk tales during rainy afternoons, learning how to tie a red thread around your wrist to keep bad winds away. But then, the people who taught you were gone. There are still children in the village now, but no elders. Survivors remain, but no one left to tell stories. You realize those small pieces of knowledge, they don't exist in books. They were never written down. They passed from mouth to ear, from hand to hand, through glances, breath, and long, unhurried afternoons. Now, no one remembers. No one knows how to mend a shirt with a broken needle. No one remembers lullabies in the old dialect. No one knows how deep to bury a bean so it sprouts in the right season. You find yourself fumbling through things that once came naturally. Boiling water until it spills over, wrapping a lopsided cake, holding a needle, not knowing where to begin. You try to remember the images, the voices, the hands, but time wears everything down. Even memory refuses to stay still. You begin to understand the plague didn't just steal lives. It stole a community's memory. The small things, but they were the roots of life. So you start writing down what you can remember. A song, a recipe for candied fruit, a remedy passed down for generations. Not because you're sure you'll need it, but because if you don't write it down, no one ever will. You light incense once a month, not for religion, but as a quiet apology for all the things you never learned in time, and for all the people who once knew them and are now gone. You used to think death was the worst thing, that as long as you lived, it was enough. But then you saw other things. A mother burying 3 children in 3 weeks, a husband watching his wife die, too afraid to come close, a child crying alone in an empty house with no one left to answer. You realize sometimes death is lighter than everything that stays behind. There are people who live, but whose eyes have already closed. No more hope, no more fear, just emptiness like a windowless wall. Some eat alone for 6 months straight, until hunger no longer feels like anything at all. Some lie in bed all day never stepping out because there's no one left to walk with, no one left to wait for. You hear laughter in the wind, then realize it's just a memory. You pass a familiar alley and something squeezes your chest because the people you loved once stood there. There are people who no longer speak, not because they've lost their voice, but because there's no one left to talk to. Some still comb their hair every morning, still make tea, still wipe dust from a framed photograph, even though they know no one's ever coming back. You begin to understand death takes the body, but it's life that carries the pain. To exist in a world with no love, no one to witness you, is a kind of punishment with no name. You've thought, if only I could have gone with them. But you didn't, because a stick of incense still burns. A letter is still unwritten. A smile you once promised to keep safe for someone still lives inside you. You keep going, not because you are strong, but because someone still needs you here. And you realize death isn't the worst thing. The worst is being forgotten, is having no one left to love, nothing left to hold on to, no reason to wake up in the morning, and if you still have someone to remember, still have hands that tremble, to light a candle at night, then even through the pain you haven't lost. You're not there anymore. Not in the clay-walled room that smelled of damp straw. Not curled up on a bug-ridden bed of hay. Not listening to midnight cries to church bells tolling death to hooves carrying someone away who would never return. You're not in that place where every cough tightened your chest, where each sunrise meant counting who was still alive. You no longer smell decay tangled in your hair. No longer pretend everything is fine while death hums beneath your skin. You're not there anymore. Now you're here, in a quiet room, soft light, clean sheets, air that carries the gentle scent of something floral, not ash or blood or rot. You're breathing steadily, not because you're hiding, but because you are safe. You can close your eyes and sleep, without fear of shadows at the window, without waking up to another name missing. You made it through. You survived. You carry the memories of those who didn't, and in that you are never alone. You're allowed to rest, allowed to let your guard down, allowed to loosen your grip if only for one night. And if morning comes and you're still here, let yourself smile. Because you're not there anymore. You're here, clean, safe, alive. Close your eyes. Don't worry, it's over now. The death bells have stopped ringing. The night air no longer bites like the hands of the dying. You're lying in a clean bed. No straw, no fleas, no fear. Just breath, soft, steady, yours. You've made it through the longest winter of your life, through days when death settled like dust on everything, through nights you didn't dare sleep, afraid everyone would be gone when you opened your eyes. But you're still here. You no longer smell the sharp sting of loss, no more distant crying in the dark, no more eyes begging you for help you couldn't give. You're here, safe. You don't have to hold it all together tonight. You don't have to pretend. You don't have to be strong, not right now. Just breathe, and let your body remember. It survived. It carried you through the days you thought would end you. Your hands are trembling, but warm. Your eyes are tired, but they can close now. Your heart is weary, but still beating, because you still have something to remember, someone to love, a reason to wake again tomorrow. So let sleep pull you gently into a place without sorrow. No moaning, no parting, just one long, slow breath and a heart slowly settling. You're still here. No rush, no fear. Just sleep. I'll keep watch for you, from afar, from a place where everything has finally quieted down. Breathe in slowly. Breathe out gently. You've walked through the whole story, step by step, through ashes, through cold, through hunger, through loneliness. You've seen everything and survived. Now you don't need to understand anything more. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to remember every name lost or hold yourself together just to seem okay. Just let go. Let your shoulders fall. Let your eyes close without fear. You've stared into the dark. You've lived through pain that had no name. You've carried stories too heavy for anyone else to tell. And now, this night belongs to you. No one can take it. No alarms. No leaving bed in the middle of the night. No one calling your name in panic. Just the night. Still, quiet, meant only for the one who made it through. If you can still hear me, know that you're not alone. Others have walked where you've walked. Carried the same weight, feared sleep, afraid they might never wake up. But they did, and so did you. Tonight let your body begin to heal. No effort, no plans, just rest. Because tomorrow is not a day of surviving. It's a day of beginning again, slowly, gently, with a heart that still beats and a sleep that's deep and dreamless. You survived. Now sleep, you're safe now. You made it here, all the way to the end. From the very first days, when the first person collapsed, when whispers of a strange illness floated through the market, you walked the reeking alleys, the cold rooms, the nights where coughing was the soundtrack of the world. You saw the helpless healers, the frauds selling hollow hope. You witnessed the ones who left in silence and solitude, with no one to hold their hand. You heard every small story, patches of cloth stitched into a heavy quilt of a dark time. And you didn't turn away. You stayed. You listened. And that is enough to make the old souls smile. Not everyone chooses to sit quietly at midnight, opening their heart to someone else's wounded past. But you did, with an open heart, with rare patience, with something deeply human. Now you can sleep. Not the sleep of someone hiding, but the sleep of someone who faced it and survived. You don't have to carry these stories anymore. They've been told, they've been lit, they've been heard. And like all pain that's been shared, they're lighter now. You can let this night pass without waking in fear, without bracing against memory, without pretending to be fine. Just the night. Just you. Just breath steady and soft in your chest. You listened, and that was a gift. To those who are gone, to yourself, and to a world still learning how to remember. Softly now. No more words. You've listened through the whole journey. From the first shallow breaths to the final memory of the one who lived. From a poor straw hut to a flickering candle in the night, you walked alongside it all. And now, there's nowhere else to go. No need to picture more bodies. No need to strain to remember who else was lost. No need to keep yourself awake anymore. You've heard enough. You've understood enough. You've carried this story gently, like someone holding an old pillow, not to clutch, but to rest. Breathe in slow. Let it go gently. The room is still. No knocking at the door. No urgent shouts from next door. No fever waiting to rise in the dark. Just sleep. After all this, no one blames you. No one asks for more. You've done what many could not. You stayed until the very end. You listened. You didn't look away. You didn't quit halfway. That's enough. Let your eyes close now. Let your heart rest just for tonight. No vigilance, no weight to carry. Just sleep, slowly, deeply, like water settling after a long storm. Because you're not there anymore. You're here, clean, safe, alive. And tonight you're allowed to be at peace. You probably thought the plague doctor was a hero. Black leather coat, long beak-like mask, walking door to door saving lives during the Black Death. But the truth is, they weren't really doctors, and they hardly saved anyone. That long beak stuffed with herbs, cloves, and flowers, not to cure disease, but to block the stench of death. People back then believed illness came from bad air. They called it miasma. The sweet smell was supposed to protect them, the leather coat. Not a high-tech hazmat suit, just easier to wipe off blood pus and vomit. Gloves, boots, goggles, not to fight germs, but to avoid direct contact. They didn't understand infection. No antibiotics, no vaccines, nothing but fear and thick layers. Plague doctors were often hired by the city, not to heal but to count the dead, to help write wills, sometimes to assess who was well enough, to still pay taxes. Few actually treated the sick, and many townspeople feared them. That beaked silhouette in the distance wasn't a sign of hope, but a sign that death had arrived. In some places, children were warned, if you misbehave, the plague doctor will come get you. Today the image is iconic, mysterious, sinister. We see it in paintings, costumes, video games, horror films, but let's not romanticize them. They weren't noble healers in a storm of sickness. They were artifacts of a time when humanity didn't understand disease, symbols of fear, guesswork, and misplaced trust. You don't need to blame them. They did what they could with what they knew. But remember, many who survived didn't make it because of plague doctors. They survived because of isolation, because they avoided fleas, because of pure chance. And sometimes the truth isn't glorious, but it still needs to be told. So we can appreciate what we know now and never go back to what we once misunderstood. In the 14th century, as the Black Death swept through Europe, people didn't know about bacteria. No one understood fleas, rats, or contagion, so they needed a different explanation, one that felt powerful, simple, divine. They believed the plague was God's wrath, that humanity had become greedy, lustful, sinful, that this suffering was deserved. Groups of people marched through towns, whipping themselves with leather cords until blood ran down their backs, begging for forgiveness. They were called flagellants, believing that if they hurt enough, God would show mercy. Jews were blamed, accused of poisoning wells, hunted, burned, massacred, not because of evidence, but because fear needs a target. Women were called witches. The poor were said to bring bad omens. Sick children were labeled devil's offspring. It was all a desperate attempt to give pain a meaning. And when no one had answers, fear became faith-twisting belief into extremism. People found it easier to believe in punishment than in randomness. But the plague didn't care about sin. It killed priests and thieves, children, mothers, monks. No mercy, no judgment. Today we know the Black Death was caused by Yersinia pestis, a bacteria. We have antibiotics. We understand transmission. We can prevent it. But it took centuries to get here. And in that journey, people blamed themselves for a horror they didn't cause. We can't fault them. When life stops making sense, faith, however misguided, can feel like the only shelter. But we can learn from them that fear is a poor compass, that curiosity is the truest prayer, and that not every pain is a punishment. Some pain is just a challenge to grow, to evolve, to see a little further than we did yesterday. We grew up with dramatic visions of the Middle Ages, shining knights in armor, princesses, in stone castles, candlelit feasts, and soft music under the moonlight. But that's a fairy tale, not history. The real Middle Ages, especially during the plague years, were dirt, hunger, disease, and the stench of death. Knights most were mercenaries or nobles who could afford armor. Many couldn't read or write. They fought not for honor, but to pay off debts. Princesses, mostly political pawns, married off before puberty, living lives of control, elegant prisons, nothing more. Castles, cold, damp, thick walls, but no insulation, no toilets, waste tossed from windows, floors covered in straw and filth, feasts for the top 1%. Everyone else ate thin gruel, rotting vegetables, and bread hard as stone. A single harsh winter could wipe out entire villages. Medicine. A mix of snake blood, urine, hot pokers, and desperate prayers. There was no health care, no pain relief, no clean water, no human rights. You could be executed for stealing bread, or burned alive for looking like a witch. So why do we still dream of that time? Because movies, games, and books have romanticized it. Because in imagination, the past always looks simpler. Because we like to believe there was once a golden age, even if that simplicity meant pain and injustice. The truth is, the Middle Ages weren't a storybook. They were an age of misery, ignorance, and fear. And if you've ever wished to time travel back, remember even brushing your teeth was a luxury, let alone surviving the Black Death. The Black Death didn't just kill people. It killed an entire world. Before the plague, Europe was crowded, fields full of laborers, cities bustling, life centered around the church and the nobility. But in just a few years, nearly half the population vanished. Families shattered, villages abandoned. In some places, there weren't enough people left to bury the dead. The consequences weren't just grief. They were transformation. Labor became precious. Survivors demanded higher wages. Serfs left the land and sought freedom. The feudal system began to crack. The church lost power. When prayers failed to save anyone, faith itself began to fracture. People started asking, if God is just, why did he kill the children too? Cities began to rise. Merchants, weavers, craftsmen, they survived. They traded. A new middle class began to form. Science began to stir. People questioned superstition. They observed more, experimented more. Slowly, universities and modern medicine began to take shape. The plague was a catastrophe, but also a turning point. It forced questions no one had dared to ask. It broke systems once thought eternal. It planted the seeds of the Renaissance, an age of light art and inquiry. Without the plague, we might never have had Shakespeare, or modern medicine, or the world we know today. The sorrow was real, but from the ashes humanity learned to live differently. For the first time, people looked the truth in the eye and asked, can we do better? And history answered yes, but not without a cost. You probably thought you'd make it, smarter, cleaner, armed with a Google knowledge grid. But in 1348, none of that existed. No doctors, no antibiotics, no understanding of germs, immunity, or basic hygiene. All you had was a musty straw mattress, rotten food, water drawn from a shared well, and coughing everywhere from every corner. No masks, no hand sanitizer, no way to know who was infected, until they collapsed. You think you'd stay calm? You wouldn't. You'd panic. You'd pray. You'd run. You'd doubt the people you love the moment they developed a dark lump and started to burn with fever. You think you'd find medicine? No. You'd find leeches, exorcisms, snake blood, and false promises from desperate hands. You think someone would help you? No. Your neighbors would bolt their doors. The priest would avoid your street. And when you died, your body would be dumped into a pit unblessed, unnamed. You think you're strong. The plague didn't care. It didn't pick the weak. It didn't spare the kind. It just spread, fast, silent, and merciless. You wouldn't survive. Not because you're weak, but because no one was ready to survive. This wasn't a test of character, not a punishment, not some divine selection. It was just a brutal reality, a time when death moved like wind and never needed a reason. You wouldn't survive, not because you didn't try, but because none of us were lucky enough. You weren't there. You didn't breathe air thick with the scent of death. You didn't sleep beside a loved one, fading by the hour. You didn't watch your parents vanish overnight with fever and never return. You weren't the child left behind in an abandoned village. You weren't the wife tucking in her husband, then waiting, and waiting, for nothing. You weren't the priest trembling before 100 corpses, wondering if God was still listening. You've never poured sanitizer into your hands and silently hoped it would be enough to save your family. You've never held someone's hand as it went cold and realized that was the last time I touched them. You weren't there, and that's the only reason you're still here. Your body carries vaccines. Your doctors studied centuries of mistakes. Your bed is clean. Your water is filtered. You know what bacteria are. You know how to avoid fleas. You know how to isolate, treat, recover. You inherited everything they never had. And they, the ones who didn't make it, the ones who died unnamed, the ones history forgot, paid the price for you. Don't forget that. Not to feel guilty, but to feel grateful. Grateful that you never had to scream a name into the night. Grateful that you have choices to work, to heal, to survive. Grateful that you never had to know what that kind of fear feels like. Grateful to live in a time where that kind of suffering is no longer normal. You weren't there. You weren't them. And sometimes not being the witness is a privilege worth carrying with reverence for the rest of your life. You're not there anymore. No cold dirt beneath your spine. No endless coughing through the night. No stale blood or rotting garbage in the corner. No one quietly slipping away before sunrise. You're no longer living through the plague. Now your bed is clean. The air around you is still. Your room has closed windows, soft lighting, a fan humming like a lullaby. You're still breathing, steady, gentle, not just to survive but to live. No more waiting for footsteps outside the door. No more dread over someone's fever. No more counting the days until the end. You are here. Not in 1348. Not among the dead. Not at the crumbling edge of the world. All that horror has faded into the shadow of history. It's just a whisper now, a story told so you could fall asleep. Breathe in and out. The warmth around you is real. Your life is real. You can let go of every tension. No one's coming to knock. No one's whispering, "We lost another one." No one's snuffing out the candle you left burning. You're safe. You're here. You're alive. So now, close your eyes. Let your mind drift far from the places that no longer exist. You're not there anymore. You're here, clean, safe, at peace.